Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's WPD Innovation Showcase event. So today we'll be focusing on the work and projects we're doing to support vulnerable customers. So I'm Ryan Huxtable, one of our innovation engineers here, and I'm joined by Stuart Fowler, another from my team. So I'm going to start by giving a brief overview of what we're going to do today. So we'll give you a bit of an introduction to the event and what Western Power are and what we do, and then why we need to innovate and how our innovation team works. We'll then have a brief icebreaker session to get everyone thinking and start engaging with the event. We'll then have a 20-minute presentation on one of our NIA projects looking to support vulnerable customers in this area. And we'll have a discussion session then where we can get your views and opinions on what we want to do in the future and have some closing remarks. So WPD, so Western Power Distribution, are the distribution network operator covering 8 million homes and customers in the East and West Midlands, South Wales, and across the Southwest. So we've become part of the National Grid PLC group, and as you'd expect, with quite a large range of license areas, we've got a number of network assets that we need to maintain and operate to keep power on to all of these customers. So why we need to innovate? Well, I think everyone's aware that there are new challenges facing network operators in terms of what we do to help customers, but also what we do to operate the network and what is going to be connected to our network. And as we get an increase in low carbon technologies and distributed generation connected all across our network, we're going to need to have more visibility and more things in place to support all of these connections. So for this reason, we've got an innovation team. So the innovation team works on the following three key values. There's a decarbonisation, where we aim to be a main contributor in decarbonisation. Excellence, so working with the best people to achieve the best outputs, and value for money, because we're passionate about making sure we use customers' money in the best way we can. So we're a team of engineers and we're all dedicated to providing what's required to meet our innovation strategy and solving the problems that we think we're going to face in the future and that you're telling us that we need to face in the future. So during the event today, we'll have a number of ways in which you can engage, and the first of these is a quick Zoom poll. The aim of this poll is just to get your opinion on how many fuel poor customers we think we've supported as a company in the last year. So whether that's between 10,000 or up to 25,000. So I'll open the poll now and give you a chance to answer. Okay, some early figures coming in, looking promising. We're in the right ballpark for what we're expecting. I'll give you a little bit longer to answer. Almost there now, 75% of you have responded. So hopefully you can see the results on the screen there. Yeah, the number is actually just over 22,000. So the large majority of you are in the sort of right ballpark between 20,000 and 25,000. So we'll now move on to a bit of an icebreaker. Again, a way in which we'd like to get you involved today is by using a software called Menti. So what we plan to do is an estimation game as to how many poles and towers do you think we have on our network. To answer this, if you could scan the QR code on the screen or put in menti.com, you'll be asked to enter the code shown there, the 56306138, and the answers you put in will be shown on the screen. So you should see this now. Again, the web address and the code is at the top there for anyone who missed it. We've obviously got quite an expansive network, as I mentioned earlier, so all of our license areas, and we need a lot of assets in place to achieve what we need to for them in terms of giving them the reliability they need. It's good to see some answers coming in there. We'll leave it a little bit longer to give everyone else a chance to respond. So we've had 8 so far. If you agree with anyone's answer, feel free to put the same answer again, and then that'll become larger on the screen just to show that more people think that. A couple more seconds. So thanks everyone for that. The answer is actually just under 1.4 million. So yeah, a lot of poles and towers we have and need to work on and maintain and operate. So yeah, thanks for that everyone, and hopefully Menti is a good way of letting you give your opinions. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we go into the main presentation for the day. If you could remain muted while we're speaking, there'll be plenty of opportunity for questions and discussion later on. So yeah, without any further ado, I'll pass over to Stuart.
Thanks, Ryan.
No problem. It should be available for you now.
Thank you. So hello everyone, I'm Stuart Fowler. I'm the project manager for Venice, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run through some insights into what we're doing. So what I do is I'll start off with some general background of the project area. I'll talk through a little bit about the project itself, what we've done so far and what we will be doing, some early project learning, how that fits with our innovation strategy, and then finally how it fits into ED2. So as Ryan mentioned, I think before, WPD produces an innovation strategy which is available on our website, and it contains a series of themes that represent our key areas of interest and focus. And these shape and focus our projects that we take forward each year. So Venice is a project which embraces a number of these key themes: data, decarbonisation and net zero, but perhaps the key one is communities and consumer vulnerability. The global pandemic has changed many things for many people, and it's vital, we believe, that as a responsible business, that we do what we can for our communities. And furthermore, we believe that Venice, if we can prove its methods, will have intrinsic value for all. If it can deliver and improve our understanding of its key aims and objectives, it will, we believe, be a significant step on the road towards understanding what is needed to make net zero happen. So what is it that we're aiming to do? So Venice stands for Vulnerability and Energy Networks Identification and Consumption Evaluation. It's clear over the last nearly 2 years that whilst we've all been working from home and finding the way through the pandemic, that vulnerability is an increasing theme for many social commentators. So how many people have been made vulnerable as a result of the pandemic? How will the industry engage with them and our existing vulnerable customers? Will the pandemic have created a double-edged sword of increased vulnerability and fuel poverty? These are, of course, very complex questions to answer. And of course, because we're dealing with people, their lives and their livelihoods, is not going to be a one-size-fits-all answer. We're hopeful that Venice can at least help provide us some useful insights into this, especially as fuel poverty is a real problem in some of our areas, for example, Cornwall, and increased vulnerability may exacerbate this problem. So Venice is going to try and lift the lid on the pandemic, vulnerability, fuel poverty, and networks. But how will it do this? Well, there are 3 work streams, which I'll talk through now. The 3 work streams has a work stream lead, Frontier Economics, Fraser Nash Consultancy, and REN, or Raybridge Renewable Energy Network. But what are they all doing? Slides are a little bit behind, I think. Hang on. Here we go. So the first work stream will be led by Frontier Economics, who will be undertaking some desktop research based on smart meter data and our network data to analyse the impact of COVID-19 on our network. This is really quite complicated to understand and made more challenging because we're dealing with consumer behaviour at the very heart of it. So what's really been happening because of the stay-at-home message, and especially with regard to energy consumption? They will then see what behaviours are going to stick longer term, as this could, of course, impact the network. And then they'll be able to tell us and the other DNOs what this means for our business planning in terms of that physical network. Moreover, given the changing nature of the message as well, it will be really interesting, I think, to see how this all pans out. Workstream 2 is led by Fraser Nash Consultancy and will be driven again by smart meter data, but also vulnerability data. It will focus on creating and then testing profiles for different types of vulnerability, and then using them to predict whether a customer is or is becoming vulnerable, which could be useful when targeting help, of course, and especially in the context of wider LCT adoption and net zero. The final work stream is led by REN, and REN are an active community energy scheme on our network in the southwest. They also have quite high levels of fuel poverty in Cornwall, and of course the pandemic may have impacted this area significantly. Therefore, the hypothesis they're going to look at is, can anything be done in a community to drive the achievement of net zero? So what tools and methods can be used to engage the community in Weybridge, regardless of their profile? They'll be engaging a number of experts in developing these tools and methods, and then use the Ofgem sandbox to test the results. The tools and methods will be made available for all communities to use, and we think this could be really exciting, especially as people become more community aware on the back of the pandemic and the work-life balance messaging. As I mentioned before, this is quite a complex project, but you'll see that the work streams are linked, and we're keen to maximise the synergies between them to get the biggest benefits for customers in our communities. So how far have we got? Well, the project started in August, so it is, I admit, early days, but I thought it would be useful to share some of the early work with you. So Frontier Economics have been working through phase 1 and are due to start working on phase 2. So they've been looking at the various hypotheses that will be tested against the data. Due to the nature of both this and the Fraser-Nash work and the need for data, this has of course brought up some challenges, and I'll cover that later, but work is progressing well. Equally, what Frontier have also been looking at is the persistence assessment and the rewards, to then determine which behaviours may well stick. This will be vital, of course, if we're to understand the longer term impact and effect of the pandemic. So where have we got to with Fraser-Nash? Well, Fraser-Nash have completed the development of the initial model based on some publicly available smart meter data, and then they've started to understand how the profile of energy use is made up of a variety of devices, and so proven the principle of what we're trying to do. This to me is an important first step. Moreover, we have also held a number of workshops with the business to start to understand the dynamics of behaviour where a person might be vulnerable. These are the essential building blocks, then moving on to building the profiles, and work is now starting on an outreach campaign with charities and consumers. For REN, the initial phase has been about literature reviews and the creation of the plan and the community outreach work. Because of the nature of this work package and its centre around a real community, I do think that the learnings and insights for DNOs will be really valuable for future engagement. And I'll come back to this point shortly, as we have some very interesting early learning. I thought what I'd now do is share some of the learning with you and draw out some key themes and messages. As I think I alluded to before, getting smart meter data is really very hard, and we're nearly there, but the value of the learning cannot be underestimated. What the VENICE team don't know about smart meter data isn't worth knowing, I believe. But thanks to their resilience and persistence, we do now have a way forward. I would personally like to thank them all for their hard work. So Zoe, Andy, Alex, Callum, Claire and Chris. They are all stars. I think some of them might even be on the call. We have found also that WPD itself had a challenge, and that because of the team's experience, this enabled them to navigate their way around it. And then finally, I thought I'd share some of the learning from REN themselves. I did mention that they had some really useful messages and learnings, and some of them are on this slide. Things like community champions to amplify messages, a small thing but incredibly valuable, I think. Equally, an interesting point about localism, assuming that because one thing landed well in one town doesn't mean it will land well in another, especially if you don't tell the latter about the former. And then finally, for me, the use of creative media to engage, a really interesting insight. And I think it's these sorts of insights that are going to be really valuable to DNOs for our community engagements in the future. So then how does this all fit into our strategy? Well, consumers and vulnerability are a key theme anyway for us. And we see ourselves as having a role in our communities. And I think through Venice, this could be an enabler for change. We cannot afford for the energy transition to fail. And we have to ensure that no one is left behind. And as such, I think Venice aligns well with our strategy. But equally, what about ED2? So how does Venice fit within our plans for ED2? Well, communities and vulnerability will act as one of our key innovation themes in Rio ED2. We plan to build on our previous work by carrying out specific projects to support energy communities and develop consumer vulnerability initiatives to ensure everyone has a chance to access new energy services and markets. At the heart of this, I believe that collaboration will be a key enabler. And it's only by doing projects like Venice that we will be able to make the changes needed to meet net zero. The system has to be accessible and fair for all, and it's imperative that we do all that we can to ensure that it is. Customers will need differing levels of support throughout the energy transition and the ED2 period. We think that Venice will take the learnings gained to date and give us some next level insights to start the push towards net zero. So I hope you found this useful, and I look forward to our discussion afterwards. I know that I said before some of the team are here, so I'm sure they might be happy to answer some questions if you've got the technical ones anyway as well. So I think I now hand over to Ryan.
Thanks, Stuart. Yeah, no, thanks for that. I hope everyone found it useful, as you said. I certainly found it interesting to see the learning we've got so far. So yeah, the next thing we'd like to do is another poll question. Again, just to sort of gain your insight on what we do in this area at the moment. So we're thinking about how many vulnerable customers we've been supporting so far with our In This Together Community Matters Fund. So yeah, again, we've got a range of responses there from 100,000 up to 650,000. So apologies. Yeah, I'll just share the poll now and see what you think the response is. Hopefully that should be on your screens. Good, we're getting some early responses, so it must be available. Again, all the responses are in the right sort of ballpark area this time. Just wait for a few more because we're at 78%, we're almost there. A few more seconds if anyone else would like to respond. And then I'll share the results. Yeah, hopefully you should be seeing that on the screen. So yeah, if you're at 350,000 and 650,000, but the most popular answer of 500,000 is the correct one. So thanks everyone for that. I'll close that down now. So as part of these events, we're keen to learn on what we've done and use your feedback. We're not at the end of the event yet, but we thought we'd make you aware that there is a feedback questionnaire available. So feel free to start answering that now and continue to do so until the end of the event. So feel free to take a picture of that if it'd be useful. But we'll now start moving on to discussion. So yeah, I'll hand back over to Stuart and he's going to run you through how the discussion is going to work.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, there's an echo.
Not from my side, you're okay.
Fine. Hang on. So what we're going to do is we're going to have two discussions. The first one really is to just look at the work we've done so far, so Venice, and then our plans for the future. But firstly, what I thought we'd do is just have a Q&A around Venice. So if you want to, hang on, bear with. So if you want to raise your hand, and if you've got a particular question about Venice, feel free to ask it. If I can't see the chat on my screen now.
If you prefer, you're also welcome to submit a question in the chat as well, but we're happy to hear from you if you'd like to raise your hand and speak. Looks like we've got a question from Richard, Stuart.
Yeah, I can't see the thing. It's hang on.
Feel free to unmute yourself, Richard.
Okay. Yeah, very interesting. This is clearly the very small tip of a very, very large iceberg. One of the things that just caught my attention is to do with the aspiration to enable community-owned generations to connect to the network, which is fine because I know there are often problems to do with constraints and so forth. But I'd be interested also to see about thoughts going along the lines of not just to connect, but to trade. I see increasingly references to the possibility of kind of blockchain enabled trading schemes where energy is sleeved, as it were, between producer and consumer. And I'm wondering whether that's on the game plan for community engagement and energy schemes.
So a number of trials have been done to look at this. So there's a Verve trial that was undertaken, I think, about 2 years ago in Hackney with LO3 Energy around blockchain metering. So to answer your question, Richard, I think the short answer to your question is I don't think it's on the radar as it currently stands, because I think the trials are complex, because the UK energy industry is probably one of the most complex in the world, the way that it's structured, and those trials, I think the summary would be not proven just yet. However, as we move towards a more flexible energy system and the opportunities to participate in being more flexible, that may therefore then, in my mind anyway, open up more discussions around and opportunities for people to use these types of technology. But as I say, I think at the moment the trials that have been done, Verve and then Centrica as part of Cornwall Local Energy Market did a trial around blockchain enabled metering to try and trade energy between participants, and it's just really, really quite complex when you've got a structure like ours. Hope that answers the question, by the way.
Thanks. So we got another question in the chat, Stuart, from William, and it's about the smart meter data. So he's wondering what the level of granularity is the smart meter data going to? Is it sort of household aggregated or postcode or license area?
So I think we probably can't answer that just yet, but it will be as a bare minimum. So it's anonymized and it's to half hours as a minimum, but we won't see it. It's the proposal is to use a third party's smart meter data.
We have another hand raised. Rosemary, would you like to unmute and introduce yourself?
I do apologise. I can't see the bar that says that somebody's raised a hand for some reason, so no problem.
Sorry, we still can't actually hear you. I'm not sure that the unmute has worked.
Yes, it's the unmuting hasn't worked yet.
I'm not sure if you've got a microphone plugged in or headphones or anything that might be causing a... Hopefully we can sort that, but just while we're waiting, another question that's coming in the chat, specifically on Workstream 2 in Venice. What are the key factors that are being looked into in order to understand and profile vulnerable customers, and how are we going to use those to predict those that are prone to vulnerability?
So Zoe unfortunately couldn't be here today. She was going to be here, but she had to go to something else. And so what we can do is we can probably provide some offline information in a bit more detail. But briefly, what's been used is some publicly available smart meter data to try and understand if you like how consumption is made up of a different number of appliances. So we know what the appliances are for these smart meters or for these households. So you can build up a site of whether people are using a dishwasher or whatever. And then the idea is that through the anonymized smart meter data for known vulnerabilities will be able to, if you like, mimic what that profile that they've got is made up of, whether it's a dishwasher or if it's dementia and it's, you know, the washing machine's going on at numerous times per day and what have you. That's the approach that we're taking in summary, but we can provide more information if that would be useful.
Can anyone hear me now?
We can hear you now, Rosemary.
Ah, wonderful. Okay, I went into settings and I again changed the microphone volume. Apologies for that. My name's Rosie Phillips. I work for Community First Oxfordshire, in Oxfordshire, obviously, and I'm a community development officer. My interest is in how you are engaging with communities in your various locations. I see that you're engaged with REN, which is a community energy scheme. In the other locations, who are you engaging with? Because I think this community champion idea is excellent, and community groups are definitely a wealth of data and information. So I just wondered how you are connecting with communities in your various locations.
Generally, or as part of Venice? Generally, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Generally.
So, yeah. So we have, and I've got a funny feeling, and Ellie's on the call as well. So we have a specific activity or a specific team that deals with stakeholder engagement, and so I'm sure that we can provide more information offline around what we use. But you know, we have a variety of charities and outreach organisations, and if you like, supporters, if you like, that we work. Okay, with. Yeah,
it might be very interesting to get involved in that. Thank you.
Yeah, fine, we can hook you up with Ellie and the stakeholder engagement team.
Thank you.
We've had another question in the chat from Will. It's just about whether we're intending to continue our Power Up scheme. I'm not sure if that's something you're aware of, Stuart, or whether that's best passed on to Ellie and Tracy as well.
Yeah, we can pass them on to Ellie and Tracy.
Yeah, we'll get back to you on that. Ellie?
The quick answer on that, Ryan, is yes, we are. We're continuing, certainly for the foreseeable future, and obviously it may well change the actual format of that delivery, but yeah, we will be running the fuel poverty projects continuing into ED2.
Great, thank you.
Right. Any more questions? Obviously, because I can't see them, Ryan. I do.
We have a hand raised from Tom. Feel free to unmute and ask your question. Introduce yourself.
Hi all. Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you, Tom.
Lovely. I'm Tom. I work at Element Energy. And Stuart, so it sounds like the Venice project is really kind of focused on identifying vulnerable customers using smart meter data at some degree of aggregation and kind of community setting. And then so I just kind of wondered, is the kind of the next part of the process, that the kind of response to that from the DNO, is that in the project scope, or is it kind of strictly looking at data and trying to kind of find the signatures of these vulnerable users?
So it's a good question, Tom. I think most of the people in the team that work with me, I'm absolutely committed wherever possible to get anything we do in innovation into business as usual, because you know, at the end of the day, the money that we spend is customers' money. So if you like, my vision would be that where anything we've done and produced on Venice can be repurposed into business as usual, we will be doing it where we are able to do so. Of course, we have certain restrictions and license conditions and whatnot that we can't unpick, but where we can repurpose what we've done because it adds value into BAU, we should be moving it over. And a good example of that might be if we can use or if we can predict vulnerability and then work in collaboration with suppliers to target help, and that is what we should absolutely be doing in my mind, having worked in retail for most of my working career. But that's to me, that's what we should be doing. Okay,
that's great. And I guess, I mean, if you're talking about working in partnership with the suppliers, I guess what's the as I think someone else made the point, the DNO doesn't own the relationship with the customer. So kind of what's the you know, what's the kind of what's pushing the DNO to be involved in this process?
Because my suspicion is that our ED2 price control will dictate that we have a more, or should be having more of a role to play in protecting more vulnerable parts of society. And you know, I would argue that, you know, as people adopt low carbon technologies, we'll need them to be adopting things like energy efficiency, because energy efficiency impacts us, you know, probably more than anybody else. So, you know, we need to be working in partnership with suppliers to help customers, and you know, I think that's the right thing to do. So we just need to find a way to make it happen if we can prove that it can work.
Okay, great, thanks.
Should we move on to the future work bit?
Yeah, that sounds good. If there are no further questions, we'll move on to the next part of the discussion. So I'll let you introduce this, Stuart.
Yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to allow you a little bit of time for yourselves just to sort of reflect on what you think we should be doing moving forward with this particular area. And then what we're going to do, we're then going to put you into groups of 2 so you can discuss it, and then come back, and then we're going to put you into groups of 4, and then you can discuss it. And then if you can then just elect somebody to feed back to us what your group of 4 thought we should be focusing on, that would be good. So I think what's going to happen next is Anna's going to
Yeah, just while you're thinking about it, Anna's now facilitating it. So yeah,
yes,
Anna's moved into.
Welcome back, everybody. I think we had 2 breakout rooms 2 and 4. So if I don't know if you've got a willing volunteer from each of the breakout rooms just to sort of run through what you discussed, that would be helpful. Room 2.
I might jump in then. We didn't formally decide anything, but I can speak on behalf of the group here. We had some good conversation, but I think the summary was we think it would be really helpful to model those who are prone to vulnerability. And so I think a lot of the insights from VENICE will be helpful as well. But also a key aspect would be to understand the methods of engagement that those things would need to be really thought out prior to doing some of these interventions or even trials. And then I think the last kind of big aspect was that there's a lot of value in smart meter data, and as it provides more granular view, but it might be helpful to understand the kind of specific questions we want to ask about that data and what we expect as an outcome from reviewing it.
So of course, smart meter data is a bit of a challenge for us, and of course we can't reinvent the energy industry in the UK. So I suppose my question is, on the back of the smart meter data, are you suggesting that we come up with other uses for it? Is that what you mean?
I think from the group, really, the position was that the kind of the research focus for the smart meter data is kind of ill-defined, and there's a area of opportunity to either layer this kind of data with other types of data and ask some targeted questions. Right.
Okay. In order to
understand vulnerability a bit more, or for other aspects like archetyping those who are using electric vehicles or different usage patterns, to understand where interventions or targeted interventions can be had, depending on the group. I mean, it's not really, we didn't have the conversation strictly associated with vulnerable customers, but
no, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, no, that's fine. Understood. And then going back to the methods of engagement, do you mean, because this interests me, do you mean the way that we communicate specifically with different sectors of society, whether they're vulnerable or not? You know, what methods we use?
Yeah, I mean, I think this just needs to be well thought out. I mean, Rosemary brought up this point. Rosemary, I'm not sure if you want to jump in and give a little bit more detail to that.
I do community development work for two companies, actually. What If I is the other one, and Community First Oxfordshire. There are so many different ways of engaging with communities, and I just wonder what sort of methods you used, because some are more successful than others, and I just wondered if there was any learning from that, or any other sort of ideas you've got of how to be creative, because so many people are fed up with being surveyed left, right and centre on everything. And I think we have to find new and fresh ways of doing that.
No, I agree, Rosemary. I think as we go through the life cycle of Venice, I think that's going to be a key outcome. I suppose the reason why I was asking the question is that, of course, if as part and parcel of ED2, we're going to have more of a more dynamic relationship around consumers and vulnerability in particular, whether or not there's an opportunity to try and finesse and make our communications more targeted with customers through whether that's through working collaboratively with charities or whatever, or through other community schemes, whether they're energy schemes or something else. But it's an interesting point. Fine. And should we go to room 4?
Tracy, shall I? We didn't talk about reporting back, but shall I have a go?
Yeah, go ahead, William. Thank you.
So, well, we ended up talking about smart meter data as well. And part because my interest was sparked because it felt like this project you're involved in sounds similar to one I'm doing with UKPN, but which is specifically focused on fuel poor rather than sort of vulnerable consumers in general.
Yeah.
If you like, you can see the fuel poor as a subset of a vulnerable group or two slightly different groups. And Tracy talked a lot about the social indicators, work maps and so on that you have, and how potentially smart meter data could add to that and complement that in terms of telling you a bit more about who's vulnerable and people who don't necessarily come forward. But specifically, the questions that we've been grappling with is what can you tell from smart meter data? And what seems to be quite clear is we can probably learn a bit about prepayment meter consumers in terms of whether they're topping up and so on, and whether they're running into emergency credit. But in terms of other groups of consumers, is there anything we can be able to, is there anything smart meter data can tell us about it? Because we don't, about their consumption patterns, for instance. And it did make me wonder, given the similarities, it feels like it would be quite useful for our project and the project, I can't remember, not sure if it's the Frontier one or the other one, that would be useful for us having a chat with each other to sort of compare notes and so on.
And we are, if you like, what's the word? We are sort of compelled to share notes with other DNOs anyway, but I've taken a note of it, and we can reach out to UK Power Networks to connect the projects together. I think so. Going back to your question though about what can smart meter data tell us, I think of course we don't see it anyway. We only see it at an aggregated level. So from our point of view, it doesn't tell us an awful lot. I think there's always this argument that smart meter data can tell you an awful lot about people because it tells you if they're not consuming, so they might be on holiday or whatever. I think the challenge in my mind though is, of course, going back to what I was saying about energy efficiency and whatnot. All of these things are of an interest to us more than they necessarily are to a supplier, because of course consumption on the electrical network is going to change. So actually being able to tell more about the consumer and how they could be supported in the energy transition, I think is a key thing for us, because what we don't want is whilst large scale outages or anything like that, because demand is too high, because we've not been able to, if you like, plan effectively. So I'm increasingly an advocate that we need to find a way to solve this challenge, and in a way which is at least helpful to customers, so that we can effectively plan the network. But as I say, William, I'll reach out to you.
Sure. Just one sort of thought on that is, obviously there's a lot of talk about moving a lot of people onto heat pumps. And I think there's quite a big concern about installing heat pumps in leaky buildings and people's electric bills rocketing as a result. So I think if you start seeing any if there's any early warning signs that is happening, that would be really useful to start flagging up and say, yes, this is a legitimate concern. We need to really be tackling the fabric of the buildings at the same time as installing heat pumps.
Yeah, and of course, to me, Richard, you described the problem because we wouldn't see it, because we don't see the data. So we wouldn't be able to correlate an increase in consumption to the fact that the property isn't thermally efficient. It's only the supplier that ostensibly would see that. We wouldn't see it, which is why, taking your point, there needs to be some coordination between, well, this is Stuart's view of the world, by the way. There needs to be some coordination around targeting thermal efficiency ahead of any kind of mass take-up of air source heat pumps or ground source heat pumps.
Sure.
It's the same thing, which is why we've got a project called Equinox that we're starting in the new year around heat pumps, in particular in partnership with the West Midlands Combined Authority and Welsh Government around social housing. There's going to be some private dwellings as well involved in the project, so that we get that balance right. But to me, it's about understanding, what the air source heat pump means in that particular type of building, and then what are the right nudges that we can provide in terms of influencing behaviour to get the flexible energy system that we need. But as I say, you've hit the nail on the head, William. we wouldn't see it as it currently stands.
If I may just come in on that, please, Stuart. I posted a question at the tail end of the last session about the need to see as it were, the vision in the form of a rich picture system model of where do you think we're all going with this, including electric transport or hydrogen transport or what have you, because then you can start to see the interactions between building heating systems and indeed the demands on the electricity network as people make a transition to heat pumps or what have you. At the moment, we're kind of poking around in a silo here, and that's not good enough really to get our heads around what the questions are that we should be asking. And I sense that's going to be a continuous challenge as to how to find the right connections through to other aspects of the energy landscape that go, that will inevitably involve the electricity network, because it's all going to fall on you guys pretty much. And yet at the moment you haven't got the data to even steer the questions accurately.
So we don't have the data, and of course I'd also argue it's not in our gift to say what the right answer is. We can't tell a customer that it's an air source heat pump of that model or hydrogen. That's not within our gift. And equally, I would suggest we're not the people to ask anyway. All we would see, as you quite rightly point out, Richard, is an impact on our network, whether that's a positive impact or a negative network, a negative impact. So I take the point. There needs to be a vision as to what the answers are, as in broad outline as we possibly can, in order for us to be able to make the right decisions. But equally, that then needs to be placed in the hands of consumers so that they can make the right decisions for them.
Yeah, but I'm sorry, just come back on that. Consumers really haven't got a clue as to what the opportunities are. So who the hell is catching this bouncing ball?
Exactly, Richard. Exactly. And of course, because we don't own that relationship with the consumer, all of it goes through the supplier. You'd argue, or I could argue, that it's with the supplier. But of course, we have a certain crisis in the supply market as well at the moment. And I think maybe suppliers are in survival mode at the moment, and this is just going to have to sit in the to-do pile for a little while, until such time as we can gain a bit of traction around this is what we need to do as an industry. I don't, to be honest, I just don't think there's an answer to you know, it's a great question, but I don't think there's an answer to it at the moment.
Just one final question to check as well, William. I know you raised your hand at the end or in between the two sessions there. I'm not sure if your question's been answered or you have anything else to ask.
I was only going to ask, can you send more details about each of the Venice projects?
Yeah, we can do that.
That'd be really interesting. Thanks.
No problem. Thanks, everyone. Well, if there's no further questions, or yeah, just to check if there are any further questions. If not, then please could I direct you towards the feedback questionnaire again. It's obviously really important to us what you think about the events and what you think about the way it's run. A few things we tried today for the first time, so the Menti and the 124 discussion. So this event series is the first time we've tried it. So hopefully you can give us some insight on whether you think that was useful and what you thought of the presenters. If you would like to provide your contact details in any of the comments boxes, we'd be happy to get in touch and discuss anything further with you, but that's totally optional at your discretion, and there's no requirement for that. That's just if you'd like to discuss any feedback with us further. So yeah, we'll just give you a few moments to do that. And while that's taking place, I just thought I'd mention as well that all of our projects are actually held on our website. So we provide updates monthly, and we put any new reports and learning we get from the project onto our website. So that includes Venice, but all of our projects. So if anyone thinks that would be useful, feel free to get in touch and look on there, or equally we accept emails to WPD innovation at westernpower.co.uk at all times. The link to the survey is also in the chat function now, but will also be emailed to all the participants after this event, and we'll also be sharing a recording of the event as well. Yeah, thanks everyone for attending, and thanks for that. Hopefully you found it useful. We're actually running this as a series of innovation showcase events. So tomorrow we're running one on our planning projects, a project we're doing called EPIC, which is working with our local councils to integrate our planning methods. Our decarbonisation event is on Thursday the 9th, where we're talking about a new project that we're just starting, looking at what we do to dispose of our creosote poles at the end of them, and a bit of a wider discussion on decarbonisation. And on the 10th, on Friday, we'll be running another session that is looking at network reliability. So again, two more projects there looking to help us realise when we're having faults on the network, LV and 11 kV, and help us plan for those and avoid any faults happening before they do. So yeah, hopefully everyone's found that useful, and thanks everyone for attending.
Thanks everyone.